Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Enterprise Edge. I am Mark Vigoroso, founder and CEO. I am overjoyed to have a colleague of mine, Knut Alicke, based in southern Germany. He is a former longtime partner at McKinsey, is currently a professor at the University of Cologne. Welcome, Knut. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks a lot for having me, Mark.
Yeah, no worries. So we're going to have a discussion. So Knut is a longtime supply chain expert, specifically in the area of digital transformation. And certainly as technology like AI is emerging, generative and predictive and agentic is emerging in the supply chain and many other sectors, Knut has a lot of good perspectives on that. And we're going to share that with our community. So thank you everybody for listening and joining. So with that, let's jump into our conversation. So I mentioned AI, Knut. The thought here is that there's a lot of disconnect between what the vendors, what the technology innovators out there, the big guys like SAP and the smaller startups that are AI native, what they're promising, what they're marketing, and then what supply chain organizations are really able to digest, implement, and scale in the near to medium term. There seems to be a bit of a gap between those two, realities, I suppose. I'm curious if you see that same gap happening, and how do you see that gap closing in, I don't know, the next matter of months, maybe years? Love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. So there is indeed a big gap. And by the way, this is not only since we have all of these AI and Gen AI promises and so on. Having started my career like 25 years ago in software, it feels like back then it was the same, that kind of software companies promised everything and they kind of painted a picture of a very nice solution that can solve everything. And then comes reality and people like, that is not working, that is not working, and that is not working. So what I see as the biggest challenge indeed is that the people are not really trained, so to say, right? So we have a lot of capabilities. The software often can do a lot, but they don't ensure that people are taken on the journey, right? So we had back in McKinsey, we had several clients where there was a new software implemented and it was not used, right? So
Yep.
one 20 billion pharmaceutical company just implemented a new planning software for a couple of millions. And we did an analysis and found that only 7 active users are logging in
Oh,
every day, right? So, and that is not because the software was bad. It's not because people were stupid. It's kind of the people were not trained on the new software. And that is also kind of reflecting on how software is selected. There's often no experience or lack of experience in the companies. So they kind of trust the nice glossy marketing pitch of the software companies. And then they come up with endless specs. And clearly the software company fulfills all of them. And then they select based on a couple of pitches, but never on a proof of concept. And I always ask my clients, hey, would you select a new car based on a 5 minutes YouTube video without having really checked it out, sit in the car? No one would do that. For software, we do that. And it's much more expensive, right? So a very important kind of try it out, do a proof of concept, do a kind of a short kind of 4 week sprint with your experienced planners, have them sitting in front of the system, and then select it. Now, what I feel with AI, and we can go more into detail on that, AI will help because AI will encapsulate a lot of the super nerdy stuff that's in the background. And with this, I'm sure that it will become better or easier, or kind of software is used more.
right, right. And in your McKinsey experience, and you spent a couple decades, right? There's about 20 years with McKinsey.
Yes.
Is that right? And all in the supply chain space. So there's you mentioned a good point about selection, right? It's technology selection, and that the very selection process is changing radically in terms of how buyers, whether they're procurement people or line of business or IT people, the process by which people are prioritizing, tire kicking, shortlisting, selecting technology vendors is radically changing with AI, right? There's a lot more AI assisted software selection processes happening. And I'm curious, in your observations and maybe working directly with clients, when it comes to selecting supply chain applications, do you think AI, whether it's simple generative AI, is going to improve either the efficiency or the efficacy of supply chain software selection?
It is definitely,
Yeah,
but as we already just discussed, the bigger challenge
yeah,
is that if we do not go from in the selection process to kind of a real world problem, kind of small real world problems that we have in our organization, then it is still a little bit artificial. So we can kind of
yeah,
clearly shorten the process, right? We can kind of gather more information. We can kind of have AI supported kind of question and answers, and so on and so on. But for me, the biggest challenge is that get your people together, ask them to work with the software and see whether that is something that helps them to be faster, to be more efficient, and to have a better result, right? If this is the case, then go for it, right? If it's not kind of enormously expensive. So Gen AI will help in the selection process, but even more important, make it practical, right?
yeah. No, that's important. That's great. That's great. So you mentioned this a little bit, Knut, a moment ago about talent, and I think it's an important point because the solutions that are being offered on the market now in supply chain are becoming more and more sophisticated. There's more and more obviously embedded AI. There's agentic AI now as autonomous agents that are executing workflow, sometimes with a human in the loop, but sometimes mostly or fully autonomous, and that's going to continue to move. But there's a lot of companies like SAP and others that are advocating for things like supply chain resilience and supply chain orchestration, and which have a lot of meaning behind them. They're big words, but there's a lot of meaning behind them that encompass business processes and people and organizations across many, many different companies, suppliers and customers and internal and external organizations. And supply chain has always been a chain, right? It's always been a chain of entities. But within all of that, there is an increasing need for talent that perhaps hasn't historically existed. And that talent could be related to AI governance. It could be related to simple prompt engineering. It could be when there's a human in the loop of an AI assisted process. What is that human intended to do? What are the procedures? What are the skill sets, right? And I'm curious, how do you see that talent landscape evolving? Do you think companies are well positioned to adapt as quickly as they need to or should in order to capture the value from some of these forward-leaning technology investments? Or tell me a little bit about how you see that sort of talent technology match happening over the next, matter of months and years.
That's a very good question, and it's very often it's not a match; it's really a mismatch.
Yeah.
So I feel that with advanced planning software, it sometimes feels like you need to have a PhD in math to really be able to set it up and to use it. And that's not what all the planners have. They're kind of
Right.
often even to grow through the organization, and they do not have an engineering degrees or whatsoever. And they because they understand the business, they have a very good tribal knowledge. They can clearly add value, right? So this is something that we always need to keep in mind. So what is it that we need? We need to have these kind of experts, PhD and supply chain type of people that can set up, that can kind of work with a software, set it up for all the others to work in the right way. we then, very important, we need to have kind of people with a business sense, right? That are the active users, right? So they might not understand all the detailed machine learning algorithms and so on, but they have a sense of, hey, this customer will probably go up, this customer will go down, and that is a super important information for your demand plan, right? They will understand that, oh, in my manufacturing site, here we have an assembly line that is kind of that struggles, and here we can produce more, here we can produce less. So that is super, super important. And this is something that companies need to develop themselves, right? So they need to make sure that, hey, here we have this great tool. You don't need to understand all the details, but we need to have you to use it with your business sense, and you with this get most out of it. So that is super important. So capability building is super important, and that is what we always see is lacking, right? So it feels like software companies kind of throw some great tool at the planners, and then kind of afterwards wonder, oh, why are you not using it, right? So why is it that we see a gap? So we need to have, to summarize, we need to have experts, right? Set it up. We need to have kind of people using the system with kind of business sense. And then what I feel is what one of the biggest benefit of all of the Gen AI, agentic AI is the interface of the planner to the algorithm. So it's sometimes it's super frustrating if you think about a planning system where if you want to kind of find out a problem, then you need to navigate through 8 different tables. So that takes a lot of time, and you cannot scale it, right? So what Gen AI can do is to kind of provide an interface to the planner that where you could even kind of talk in natural language, and then kind of translating it to the engine, so to say, to do the analysis, to get everything done, and then to leverage the system. That would be super, super interesting. And as a side effect, you could also kind of from the planner, you could, so to say, learn the tribal knowledge, right? Not to replace the planner, but to enhance the planner, right? And I'm sure that there is a couple of tasks that are super boring that will be automated by Gen AI, but there is an even bigger impact in making the planner more successful by showing more information, showing kind of the end-to-end impact of a decision that the planner might want to put in, and with this increasing service, increasing availability, right? So the big impact is not necessarily, oh, we can reduce kind of our planning team by 10%. The big impact is the planner can do much better decisions, and with this increase the availability. There is one thing that we always need to keep in mind, and if you think that kind of further, then it basically means that we use the planner not for standard tasks, but only for the tasks where he or she can really add value, creative, intellectual, stimulating tasks. So that means that your current day maybe looks like, hey, 70% of my day is I copy things from here to there, kind of overdoing a bit. And only 30% is intellectual stimulating. Now it might be that we now get to 90% intellectually stimulating. That for some people might be extremely stressful, right? Because they kind of need to be up every minute, right? We love it, right? But there is a lot of people out there that might not enjoy that. So that is also something that we need to keep in mind. But I see that with all of these new applications, we will see kind of a better application of the planning tools with clear impact on the performance of the supply chain.
You made a good couple points there, Knut. I wanted to touch on real quick. So one of the most common questions I get in our practice is mostly from end users, not just supply chain, but is AI going to take my job, right? Is agentic AI going to take my job? And I've seen it phrased, and I think it's true, is that most folks are not going to be replaced with AI. If anything, they're going to be replaced with people who know how to use AI, right? So there's a skill set development that's happening where people who know how to coexist and co-work with AI assisted and AI enabled standard operating procedures are going to ascend. They're the ones that are going to lead going forward. And so it's not like the rise of the machines. It's more like there's a competency that's going to be highly valued as companies continue to evolve quickly. And you mentioned forecast. So one of the lowest hanging fruit, again, I've talked to a lot of companies that say that forecast accuracy in the supply chain is one of the earliest potential use cases for actual scaled operationalized impact from AI, both generative as well as agentic, right? And people talk about improvements in forecast accuracy percentage. And I'm curious, from your McKinsey experience and even most recently with your academic experience, number one, would you agree that forecast accuracy is in fact one of the most addressable use cases in the near term? And then what would be a reasonable incremental improvement that people should expect on a KPI like forecast accuracy percentage?
I have a bit of a different opinion on that.
Okay, please. That's why you're here.
Exactly. Maybe a comment on your first comment on, hey,
Yeah.
the people that know AI will replace you. I
Yeah.
only partially agree with that. It's the people
Okay.
that know AI and know the business, because I
Okay.
think what we undervalue is that if there's some AI nerds coming over, they will not plan better, even with the best
Yeah.
AI system, because they don't understand the business. So now to
Yeah.
the forecast accuracy, that is a quite interesting discussion. If you think about the last 20 years, that was always the case for all new software, where everyone always said, hey, we improve your forecast accuracy and that everything is fine. And then you look back into what really happened, and then the forecast accuracy was improved a little bit here, a little bit there, and you did not see the impact on the in the P&L.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because this forecast was improved standalone, but it was not integrated into everything else. I just last year had a discussion with a client where we were discussing inventory optimization. And they had also set up a new great forecast improvement project. And then I asked them, hey, how do you calculate inventory? How do you calculate your replenishment strategy? And he was like, yes, it's days of coverage, right? Or reach or whatsoever. There is nothing in these calculation on forecast accuracy. So if the forecast accuracy is 100%, the days of coverage would not go down. No impact. And that is where I feel that, first of all, we need to understand the end-to-end implication, right? If we improve the forecast, clearly we should have lower inventory. We should be able to plan better. We should have better utilization in production, and we should better call off from the suppliers. There is clearly an impact. But if on the first inventory that is not considered, right, and on the first decoupling inventory, then there's no impact, right?
Yeah.
And that is why I'm always skeptical if people say that, improved forecast accuracy will solve everything. It will not.
Yeah.
The next thing, in our book Source to Sold, we had a very interesting interview with Jim Rowan, CEO of Volvo, and back then with Dyson. He said that, look, as a supply chain guy, it's always easy to blame sales for the bad forecast, right? And say, it's not our fault. The sales guys should do a better forecast. But if they are not able to do that, then we need to, in supply chain, we need to make sure that we set up the supply chain in terms of flexibility and so on to work with the bad forecast, right? Yeah. That is kind of the best practice. If this is the case, then a better forecast will clearly improve the overall supply chain. So
love it.
I don't agree, and
I love it.
But kind of working on forecasting. Depending on where you start from, you can easily have kind of 10, 20 percentage points improvement, right? But I can only encourage everyone to check what happens with this forecast. And if there's nothing happening with this forecast, just don't try to improve it, because it will not help anything, right?
Yeah.
You need to kind of use it in the end-to-end value chain.
Yeah, it's we're gonna follow up, because there's such a long discussion here around forecasting, because there's a sort of a question around the law of diminishing returns. Because if you think about it, right, there's this hypothesis that with AI's ability to facilitate the ingestion of so many more data points and so many more factors and so many more internal and external maybe predictors of supply and demand, that therefore, sort of ipso facto, you will have a more accurate forecast. But I think your point is the question is, okay, well, what is the, based on where you're starting, what is the actual value operationally and financially of a better forecast, right? Is it actually important to focus there and improve an increment? And I think that's part of the challenge is people are trying to figure out what, I've got a hammer, it's called AI, and what's the best nail for me to go pound right now? And so people are starting to wave their hand and say, hey, I think it's forecast accuracy. Oh, wait a minute, I think it's supplier risk optimization. Oh, wait a minute, I think it's whatever, business network
Exactly.
optimization.
And
So
and and then and then
yeah,
and then what happens is then you have kind of these siloed solutions where you kind of for that
yeah,
silo even improve, right?
yeah,
So you improve your forecast accuracy, but you don't link it to the rest. You improve your transparency on suppliers, and then you have kind of a better risk monitoring, but you don't
yeah.
link it in your S&OP process and with the scenario
That's right.
planning.
That's
And
right.
and with this, you don't see any impact, right? Or you apply it for whatever inventory optimization, but then you have people kind of overriding it because they fear that we're going too low, right?
Yeah,
And only if you really have it end to end, and if you kind of take the people along with you, then you have the impact. And the impact is clear. The impact is on service availability. That's the most important KPI in supply chain. It's very often not considered. Very often
yeah,
people look into cost and to inventory, right? Because that's
yeah.
easier to manage. But lost
Right.
sales is the single most important KPI in supply chain.
Yeah. No, that's great. So Knut, we're going to have you back because I have about 50 more questions. So we're going to, we're going to close with two quick ones. The first one, can you tell folks how they can get a hold of that book that you mentioned? I'd love for people to know where they can get their hands on that.
They're very simple. Go on Amazon.
Yeah.
Myself and Radu Palamario are the authors. The book is
Yeah.
called Source to Sold.
Yeah.
And if you allow me a 30 seconds pitch, we
Please go. Yep.
3 years ago, Radu and I kind of thought about, hey, why is it that we do not see more people in the board, so CEOs, COO, with a supply chain background? And then we discussed a bit about board because it's kind of these are nerdy people, they're introvert, they don't like this kind of being at the top. And we said that we need to change that. And to change that, we started then to interview people that made it, so to say, to the CEO and have a supply chain background and ask them kind of, hey, how did you get there? What is special? Kind of what is recommendations for your for young students? And that is 26 of these interviews, and then we kind of condensed the
Wow.
chain model because that was kind of the similarities that we saw. And it's a great book, so go for it.
Yeah.
Source to Sold.
That's great. Thank you, Knut. And is there a Kindle edition?
Sure, there's a Kindle
Okay,
edition.
of course. Of course. All right. Well, let's wrap with one last question, then we'll let you go, Knut. We mentioned resilience a moment ago. It's a hot sort of lightning rod issue in supply chain these days, post pandemic. The whole idea of being more adaptive and more anticipatory of supply chain disruption, whether that's acts of God or geopolitical situations or whatever, being more resilient, having contingency plans, having plan B through Z. And I'm curious how you see supply chain software and technology applications and services following that trend of resilience in the post-pandemic world, because I'm not so sure supply chain has always been architected to enable what is really the meaning behind resilience, which is quite a complex set of math, right? And I'm curious how you see that. Is that something that you're observing, and your final thoughts on that?
So indeed,
Yeah,
the discussion on resilience is quite an interesting one.
yeah,
We helped a lot of clients in the last 5 years to become more resilient. If you think about from a software perspective, what they need, actually it's everything that end-to-end planning software offers, right? So I would say theoretically we have everything. Let's say you need to assess the whether there is a disruption. It might be in your suppliers, it might be in your own plants, it might be in your customers, it might be in the transport in between. With this assessment, this disruption, you would then need to kind of have a list of mitigation levers, right? A lot of companies did not have these lists; they were not prepared for that.
Yeah.
So that is something that we need to come up with. Then we need to evaluate, right? Because it's always that the notion is always that if you are setting up a resilient supply chain, that is very expensive because you need to have a lot of inventory, you have cost, you have kind of expedition, you have multiple suppliers. And to a certain extent that is true, but we need to understand where's the threshold, where does it make sense? So we need to understand the trade-offs. And this is where current software is not used in the right way or cannot offer it. So for example, you want to understand, hey, I have this one supplier and I know that I need to have a second source for this one very important component. And I can source that from Asia or I can source it locally. Now, you want to evaluate what's the difference. You have freight cost, you have inventory, you have availability, and so on and so on. So that is something that that needs to be done and is not yet to the full extent done by the software. So that is something. Then, very important, next to software, we need to also make sure that we have the right story, because there is a lot of boards that kind of really think short-term profit, and then they kind of hear you talking about, oh, we need to kind of increase the cost a bit to be more resilient. Oh, but what if nothing happens, right? So we need to tell the story. So like everyone understands that you need to have a car insurance, right? No one would question that. But for a supply chain to be more resilient, no one understood, right? So we need to kind of understand what is the value at risk, what is the margin at risk if we don't do that, and then we can kind of come to a trade-off, because it doesn't make sense to kind of build inventory for 5 years or so. There is clearly a trade-off that needs to be understood and evaluated. And honestly, the process to do this on an ongoing basis is the good old SNOP or IBP process. So,
Yes.
This is the place where this needs to be discussed and where we need to prepare. Honestly, most of my clients never had a proper scenario planning in place. And if you don't have scenario planning, you cannot evaluate how much do you invest in resilience and not. So there's a lot to do. And with this, and honestly, it's also it's always changing. So it's not that we kind of now have a project in 2 months, we have a resilient supply chain, and then we move on. We need to, on an ongoing basis, check, because the things change, kind of trade conflict, disruptions everywhere, global warming, and so on. So we need to kind of stay flexible and adaptable. And with this, we need to, in the SNOP process, always look into different scenarios and what might happen, what might not happen, and what do we do against it.
No, I love it. It's kind of a reminder, right? There are a lot of fundamentals, a lot of building blocks that exist with core processes like SNOP, where you have the S, the input, and the OP, which is the response, sort of, right? And that constant syncing, right? And it's not like you have to wipe the slate clean and start all over. There's a lot of foundational building blocks procedurally and technologically. So I know we're running up against time. So Knut, thank you so much for your time. You're a busy guy. I meant what I said. We'll have you back shortly. I enjoyed the conversation. Please check out Knut's book on Amazon. I will, most definitely. Thank you all for joining. We'll catch you on the next episode of The Enterprise Edge. See you all. Take care. Bye-bye.